Hello, Paul.
Hello, Francis. Good to meet you again.
Yes, it's lovely to see you again. Thanks for making the time to talk to us today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, so my name's Paul Kipax, and I'm the Senior Marketing Director in a local global technology firm. And within that, I run a group that's involved in strategic marketing and the development of marketing programs.
Thank you very much for agreeing to share your experience of a new service that I've launched, which is about allowing someone to take a very focused three-step approach to solving a major problem. Do you remember a situation in which you and I had a private conversation about an issue that you had at work, and you asked whether there was anything that I could do for you as a private client?
Yes, so I came to you and I had an issue with really about my ability to fulfill the full scope of the role that I was involved in, and it was worrying me quite a lot. I was involved at that time in a product management type role, but also looking at what was happening within a particular industry sector as well, and it engaged my passion as an individual, which is always good for me, but at the same time it was eating away at more and more of my time, and I was conscious also that I had a team that I was managing alongside my role in setting strategy, and I could sense that maybe my interaction with that team was starting to slip as well. And so I was looking for some help, some coaching to help me understand why I'd ended up in that situation, and to the approaches that I could take to really rebalancing things.
And how is that affecting you personally?
Um, well, it was. I'm always a person who prides myself on being able to respond, being able to give good insight. But I felt that I really wasn't getting the time that I needed to think. I'm one of these people who likes to reflect. I take data and I reflect. I was getting worried about that. My response then, unfortunately, and you can read coaching books that tell you working harder isn't going to be the answer to it all the time. But I was working harder and longer in order to try and cover things, so it was eating away at my time in the evenings and going towards the weekends as well. I was spending a lot of hours in the office when people had left trying to cover stuff, and really that wasn't something that was sustainable. And it's something that my wife in particular, who's always straight with me, started flagging as really an issue that I should get some help. So she was part of the motivation of coming to you alongside my own personal understanding of the situation.
And do you remember the three-step program that I put together for you?
So yes, so the process we went through was really an initial phase, which was a shorter meeting where we went through just in general how did I end up in or what was the nature of the situation I was in, what had led to it, what were getting some idea of the requests of my time, my activity within that, how I was working with individuals, and that was really a process of understanding the full scope of the problem, and through that we then decided, well, there's one core issue here that we should dive into
Yeah.
in more detail, and that's then set the program for a longer coaching session, and where we then considered that single element of the overall problem, and you coached me through my blind spots and approaches to that issue. And having reflected on that, we had an exit process, if I remember, where we agreed on an implementation plan, and we committed to that.
Yeah, so I put together a three-step package for you, which consisted of identifying the scope of the issue, then choose one area and plan for it in detail, and then implement it. And I offered that to you for £500. What was your reaction to the cost?
Um, I thought it was quite reasonable, actually. I'd known about you. I mean, we used to meet up in training classes and things like that. If you remember that,
Yeah.
Francis, and I knew your background in terms of where you had worked, and your experience of operating in companies and in roles that were larger than the one that I was in. So really, it was an opportunity for me to learn from someone who From what I understood, my interaction with you, you had considerable understanding, but also I could see from your website and talking to others you were coached at the time, that it was something that there was a lot that I could learn through that process. So I decided to invest in it. It was a decision. You have to decide where you spend your money and what the value would be, but it was an easier decision to arrive at, to go ahead.
So what happened when you started working with me on your issue?
The process started, as we said, with a very general overview. What was happening? It's important to point out that this was all under confidentiality, so we talked openly, and there's a relationship between you and the coach, and the person. That means you can be open, and that's quite formal in the way that it was handled. Mm-hmm. So I was able to describe what was happening within the role that I was fulfilling at the time, what my worries and concerns about that were. You guided me through that, taking me to different levels of it, and really through that process we were able to pick up on a series of themes that kept recurring in my description of the situation that I was in. And the one that came up really was, what is the scope of your role, Paul? You are doing all this work, but are you sure you're fulfilling something that's realistic to be handled? And that was what we decided to dig into.
Mm. And what was the outcome?
So that was interesting in that. Really, it started to call me. So I mentioned earlier on, I'm driven by passion in certain things in my job. That's a blind spot for me. I can use that passion to excuse myself to first ignore other stuff that needs to be done. I don't know if anyone listening to that experience, listening to this experiences that also. But also it means that I was overextending myself. That really, given my position in the company and what was required of that position, was not realistic for a single individual to carry out. But really where it started to bite was where you said, well, why is that reasonable for the teams that you lead, Paul? Because if you're doing that, how are you helping those other individuals within your team? How are you providing the air cover and direction and input to their coaching and mentoring needs within the organization?
So how did you resolve this particular issue?
So that required tough action on my behalf. The action was to actually go back to my manager and have a discussion with him and his manager as well, and say, what role am I fulfilling in this organization? Please, can you state that? And please, can we set the requirements on me and my team relative to the role that's critical at this point? We can no longer have an organisation where there's a belief we can cover all of these things through a single individual or team. And I got a letter saying, okay, we accept this situation. This is the role we need you to fulfill in this organisation going forward. And that was both liberating, but of course, it meant there were things that I dropped.
And what's been the long-term benefit for you, Paul?
Well, there was an immediate benefit in that it became clearer what I should be doing with the team. I dropped interaction with one team, that was a managed process. But over time, it meant that I was able to focus on the strategic direction for that group. Within less than a year, there was an opportunity within the group, and my manager at the time left the business. There was a reorganisation that occurred around the group that I was in, and I stepped forward. I applied for this role that my manager was in as part of the direction of the director within the business, which is something I would never have done before, and I had the confidence to do that because I could look back into what we had achieved within the group and say, well, there's something here that could be more broadly applied across the entire group rather than my specific part of it, and that was recognised by the business, or at least I believe that was part of why they accepted me for the role.
So you got promoted as a result of this?
Yes, there was an opportunity for promotion. I was accepted into that role. Great.
So the big question is, what was it like working with me?
Working with you was good, but I'm not going to say that that's because it's a comfortable experience. Good coaching I've learnt has elements that are comfortable, that are to do with discovery and your work on a journey, but at a point becomes difficult because the coaching exposes you to a question that you're hiding from yourself, or an issue that you're just not addressing. And so I found that working with you was there was a realism in the interaction that that you understood there was something that needed, that I was part of the program because there was something to be achieved, and you were keen that that value was brought out of the discussion between us.
So, would you recommend this 3-step program to someone else?
I would say yes. If you've got an issue, and particularly one that's been something that's been there for a long time, you've been trying to break through on it. You've been trying to work out, well, why have I ended up in this loop? You're handling a situation, I guess, with all the changes that are occurring in businesses at the moment. You're having to work in different ways, and you're unsure how you can how to address that with your time, or whether you've got the skills or confidence to approach it. I'd say that yes, this is one way of taking an issue, exploring it in depth in a guided way, and setting a plan for addressing it.
Well, thank you, Paul. In the current COVID-19 pandemic, there are lots of people who are worried about retaining their jobs and worried about whether they're going to have to look for another job. So thank you for sharing your experience with them. And I'm sure they'll be interested to see how your career develops from here on as well.
It's good to talk to you today. Thank you very much, Francis.
Thank you, Paul. If you want to look up other stories about my coaching successes, please look up francischristie.co.uk. Thank you very much.